Some of you might know Ada Lovelace, one of the very first programmer. Computer science owes her so much that there is an International Ada Lovelace Day. Maybe you don't know about Hedy Lamarr, a Hollywood star turned engineer who created the basis of the Wi-Fi technology. And perhaps the Hidden Figures movies introduce you to the great Katherine Johnson. If you don't know about all these fantastic women, I encourage you to read Claire Evans' book, Broadband, the untold story of the woman who made the internet. We're just starting to actually pay homage to the great computers, scientists, the great innovators who were female and who changed the technology world as we know it. Because if nowadays the innovation world is thought to be sort of out of bounds for women, this is a fairly recent shame. In 1986, 37 of all students in computer sciences were women. And since then, their numbers have just dwindled every year. And changing that, attracting every and all talents is a social and economic necessity. And to talk about how we can best tackle this challenge is a great panel hosted by Karen Shaw from CNBC.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this session here at VivaTech. Most of you have probably spent the morning talking about disruption. We're going to continue that conversation, but from a slightly different vein. Let me introduce you to our panelists. Holly Ridings, NASA's Chief Flight Director. Jonas Prising, ManpowerGroup Chairman and CEO. Welcome here to the stage at VivaTech.
Thank you.
Thank you. Many companies have been demonstrating how technology and innovation shape the future, transforming businesses and, crucially, profits. Society's been altered by technology trends like big data, the Internet of Things, cloud computing, and down the track, 5G. But we must also consider the impact on the workforce, people, skills, jobs, how they will be transformed by innovation. So let's find out how NASA and ManpowerGroup are tackling that challenge. Holly, first up, NASA, a space agency created right back in 1958, always at the forefront of technology, attracting the best talent in the world. How is this being disrupted by digitization and automation?
So first of all, good afternoon, everyone. It's such an honor to be here. This is my first opportunity to come to the conference. So to answer the question, certainly NASA started many years ago, and so we're having to learn how to continually evolve. The space industry is moving very, very quickly, as many of you know, with partnerships, international, in terms of sovereign nations, commercial companies, and also domestic partners, certainly from a commercial standpoint as well. And so when you talk about manpower and hiring and what's attractive to the workforce today, one of the things we have to do is continually keep up with the lifestyle that they are interested in, a lot of opportunities to work in different ways. It's not the traditional come and sit in your office, 9 to 5 type thing that you saw in the early days. You also don't need everyone to be in the same room together, right? And so, again, if you're solving technical problems, it's always helpful to do part of it face-to-face, but expanding our infrastructure in order to do that. The second part of it really is the technical problems themselves and the ability to leverage what's going on in the entire world to solve those problems. And so part of me being here specifically and what we're constantly actively looking for is all of the new ideas from the other countries and our partners across the globe.
Jonas, you're at the forefront of recruitment. I've been talking to a couple of companies here, and they're talking about the next phase where business truly adopts some of the data and the analytics and runs with it. What does that mean for the workforce? Will jobs be threatened?
Well, that is the big debate, of course, and that's what we read about in the papers all the time, that automation is going to eliminate so many jobs that we will have to pay people a basic income. And I think at this point, though, the evidence so far is pretty clear. There are some jobs that are being eliminated, but there are more jobs and new jobs that are being created. So there might be a time of disruption where this doesn't play out the way it has played out always in the past. But overall, we're very firm believers in that the impact of technology will be positive and generate more growth. Now, the one area, though, that we feel we underestimate the impact on is that the impact on the existing workforce is going to be tremendous. Because to take advantage of technology, you need a higher level of skill. So a lot of the work that we do is to try and understand how can you upskill and reskill the workforce to prepare them for the impact of technology. Because 60 to 70% of the jobs are going to change materially due to the impact of technology, whereas maybe 5 or 10% of the jobs are going to be eliminated.
We've seen different trials where very high-skilled jobs, like being a news anchor, for instance, can be done by a robot. Other examples in medicine where you have seen robotics come into play. Is there any evidence that jobs in the space industry can be replaced by robots or AI?
So I think it's a little bit like what Jonas was saying, that they work together. So the International Space Station, as an example, we have robotic capability. We can have the astronauts and cosmonauts on board the space station maneuver the robotics. We can also do it from the ground more remotely, and we can even do it using some automatic AI type sequences. So it's not a one-for-one, you replace jobs with robots. You figure out how to make them seamlessly work together to more efficiently accomplish your goal. And I'll give you an example. 2 weeks ago, we had a power distribution box on the space station stop working. And so our options were send our astronauts out in spacesuits to fix it, which is a lot of fun, but also one of the most dangerous things that we do, or we could use our robotics capability to do it. In that particular instance, we chose to use our robotics capability to replace the power box. We got back enough, the word I'll use is redundancy, enough power in order to bring our next cargo vehicle, which happened to be a Space Exploration Technologies cargo vehicle, up to the space station. So that took a team of people pulling all of that together, but ultimately the way we chose to finish the operation, execute the operation, was robotically. So that's, I think, how it all integrates together in a specific technical example for the International Space Station.
One of the big trends in employment right now has been the skills gap. Unemployment rates keep on pushing towards lows in many different countries. I had a conversation with IBM, Ginny Rometty, today. She was talking about not needing a 4-year degree. And traditionally in the past, if you didn't have the paperwork, you were just not getting through the front door. How is this changing as companies try to build a skill set and try to think beyond what they typically would in terms of hiring?
One of the things that technology brings is a rapid evolution, and sometimes at an accelerating pace. And when you think back about education, every time that there's been a disruption, societal disruption, so agrarian society to industrial society, or industrial society to post-industrial society, every time it's been accompanied by a revolution or a significant disruption also in education. So agrarian to industrial society meant that all countries instituted mandatory schooling for kids, which wasn't the case before. Post-industrial revolution meant that giving access to to more people of various backgrounds so they could access higher education, which was necessary to drive the next step change of growth. Right now, we educate our workforce and we educate our kids exactly the same way we educated them 60 years ago. So I think what Ginny is referring to, which is also very aligned with our belief, is that we're yet to see the revolution and the next phase of education. And if we were to imagine what it would look like, it would be shorter courses, more iterative, stackable, so you can add technical skills, you can add soft skills, and eventually make your way to a degree, but it's going to be much more iterative and much more of an earn and learn cycle, because that way you're able to acquire new skills as you go on. And I think that's going to be a very nice complement with the rapid evolution of technology as well.
I'm curious about how widespread that will be and whether it will impact your industry, Holly, because I wonder if there's been a traditional pathway to becoming an astronaut, for instance, and whether you could see that changing now with the skill shortage, disruption, all the different trends we're talking about.
Yeah, so certainly there has been a traditional path for becoming an astronaut and then doing many other technical jobs at NASA as well, right? So the flight director job, as an example, you know, it's a 4-year technical degree from an accredited university, fairly typical. Astronauts all have typically masters or even doctorates, same type of thing from an accredited university. What that has told you in the past is really there's a technical aptitude that is, you know, sort of the baseline to entry to doing these jobs. And so as the industry changes rapidly, again, that's sort of the entry point and also proof that you can learn. You can buckle down, you can work hard, but avionics in space is very different now than it was, you know, 20 years ago, as an example. So even those people who've taken that 4-year degree or that master's or that doctorate have to be continually learning. So again, kind of what you were saying, that ability to continuously learn was originally proven with a traditional degree. When there becomes another way to prove that capacity, then I think you'll start to see the sort of education requirements transition a little bit. I don't think we've quite gotten there yet, but I do think there is an opportunity to go in that direction. And some industries, such as, you know, IT security, that type of thing, have already headed a little bit in that direction.
I had some stats, and I hope these are correct, but I was looking at average salaries in your industry. $62,500 annually on average, $30 an hour, 2% higher than the national salary in the States of $61,000 per year. It seems like these salaries may have to rise if the skill set also starts to broaden out and becomes more competitive to recruit. What do you think?
I think that many of the people who work those jobs definitely hope the salaries rise. I do think that the industry will become increasingly competitive, again, from that technical aptitude standpoint. And so if you can demonstrate your capacity, the way I think about it is, in the past you demonstrated capability. So I created a product like the one you need. Now it's more capacity. I created this product and I can sort of translate or explain to you how it might be the thing you need in the future. And I think for folks that have that combination of the technical aptitude and the soft skills and the ability to demonstrate how it will be valuable going forward, I do think the salaries will rise. What that potentially means is there are salaries in other places that will go down.
Do you want to weigh in on this, Jonas?
Yeah, no, you know, wage inflation in general has been low for a number of years, even though we have a very significant skills shortages both here in Europe as well as in the US. But I love the you know, the analogy that, you know, I've always wanted to say it's not rocket science. In this case, it is rocket science. And even within your field, that you have this need and continuous learning that, of course, you know, has to happen, is true across so many industries. And generally speaking, as those step changes occur, wages also rise significantly because they rise when productivity increases. Giving significant wage increases when productivity is not moving up is not a sustainable path. But if you combine human capability with technology so that productivity really moves up at a much more accelerated pace, that's when you are going to get much more significant wage inflation across the board.
There's a tipping point, though, isn't there? Because otherwise we'll see more and more tech entrepreneurs around conferences like this, because people simply will not want to take their significant tech skill set and work for someone else. They'll want to start up their own business. Are you seeing that right now?
No, I'm sure that within technology, and as you can see exemplified here at VivaTech, there are a ton of technology startups. And at our ManpowerGroup lab, we have a whole collection of startup and entrepreneurs that are, you know, creating value in the HR value chain. And I think some will, of course, do this, but a lot of organizations need the same kinds of skill sets and the same type of entrepreneurial spirit, trying and applying new things in new ways so that they create step change. So I don't think that it's a wave of entrepreneurs that is really going to move the pendulum from one extreme to the other extreme, but I do think it's going to become much more prevalent, and in particular in the tech industry.
Let's talk a little bit further about the skill set, because I know you want to talk about IQ and EQ and recruitment, but I want to go to Holly first on this, because you just mentioned, you know, it's not rocket science. Well, you know, in this particular case, if it is, does that mean IQ is still way more relevant than EQ in recruitment in your industry?
So I actually think it's starting to balance out a little bit more than it has traditionally. So I think if you go back to the beginning of NASA and kind of the early days of space, you know, IQ was hands down what folks looked for, the technical capability. But in the world we live in now, and I said at the beginning, the industry is just growing so rapidly. The first 10 years of my career, I was involved with just a few space vehicles, and now, you know, I run a team and we do, you know, a dozen or more that we're somehow involved in, either flying ourselves or partnering with countries or partnering with commercial providers. So it's almost asymptotic in terms of the amount of space technical work that's out there. And so what does that mean? It means that the relationships, the communication skills, the ability to negotiate, to solve problems together, to find common ground is just increasingly valuable. And so finding a technical person, you guys have all met engineers who don't like to talk to people. So finding those engineers that really do have that EQ and kind of the balance and the juxtaposition of those two different skill sets, those are actually the most valuable people.
So Jonas, why is the smartest person in the room not necessarily going to be the most successful or the best employee?
I think it very much goes back to what Holly was, you know, illustrating. In a field where you would think it would all be about technical knowledge, you know, a lot of that knowledge today is accessible very quickly, and some of the most difficult computations can be done with the help of technology and NI and other things, which means that knowledge in itself is not the unique knowledge. Putting it together with other things, being able to find patterns and combining them in the ways and accessing what other teams know, that then becomes the big driver. IQ generally is not regarded as a good predictor of job performance. So that's why we started talking about EQ, you know, so the soft skills that Holly's referring to as an important component also to predict success. We think the next phase and evolution of this is going to be LQ, the learnability quotient. So they're not mutually exclusive, but they build on each other. So somebody's ability to rapidly acquire knowledge is a better predictor of how well they will do. I had the opportunity to meet the Israeli Defense Force branch that deals with cybersecurity. And of course, as you can imagine, this is a very developed part of the Israeli branch. And these are not secrets, of course, and otherwise they wouldn't have told me. But their recruitment was primarily previously based on best and highest IQ at an early stage and identify those young individuals so that they recruited them into that branch when they did their military service. But a number of years ago, they changed their recruitment methodology because it was no longer sufficient to just be very smart. Because the field changes so quickly, they are now recruiting on their ability to learn. So it's not the highest IQ that gets it, but the people with a good level of IQ but have a very quick learning pace are the ones that they recruit predominantly, because they need to have somebody from not knowledgeable to sufficiently knowledgeable to defend the country up in 6 to 8 months. And then they have another 2 years to go in their military service. So they've changed their recruitment based on that measure.
I want to know more, because a lot of us were trying to work out how to cheat some of those EQ assessments. You know, you had to pick what type of animal you like and then, you know, repeat the same response somewhere down the track. LQ, you're working on investing in this type of assessment. What do we need to know about LQ assessments?
Well, LQ is really what a learnability quotient. So our ability to pick up skills at an increasing pace, and also our personality in terms of, are you curious, do we actually want to do this, and whether one is, you know, more likely to engage in continuous learning during the course of your career. And I think, Holly, you mentioned that, you know, in your field, people need to continue to acquire this knowledge, because even if you have a master's in physics, space physics, you know, 20 years ago, that's not going to be the kind of skill set that's going to be sufficient. You know, trying to understand what to do in today's space science field. So, you know, understanding and assessing people on that particular point, which is absolutely doable. And at our ManpowerGroup lab, we have some of those assessments that tackle and measure exactly that. is what we think employers are increasingly going to be looking for, because they know it's very difficult to predict what skills are needed in the future because things evolve at a rapid pace. But so if you are looking for somebody, you are probably going to have some base requirements, but you're going to be very interested in somebody who's able to acquire new knowledge during the course of their career so that they can stay within the organization and continue to evolve as the organization evolves.
I'd say for us, the other piece of the learning is there has to be a quickness associated with it. Sort of in slang in English, I would say snap. You've all met the people who have that snap. They're just quick. And so we've been working on trying to figure out how, again, to identify in people the capacity of that, and a better term maybe is flexibility or adaptability, being able to pick things up very quickly, because flying in space, you often have to make, life and death decisions very fast. Sometimes you have to do that when you have way too much information. We call that the 700% problem. Make a decision now, try to peer through all of that data, and sometimes you don't have enough. Sometimes you only have 70% of the data you need, and you have to make a decision. And so you start to flesh out what this learning looks like for us. You have to love to learn, you have to do it continuously, you have to be able to do it quickly, and you also have to be able to grapple with too much data or too little data and still make a decision, on a timeline where it could have ultimate consequences. And so finding all that skills is what we look for, and again, it's a pretty unique combination of folks.
Let's tackle diversity in STEM, because still the numbers are not strong enough. For every 2 male graduates, there's 1 female. If you look around the room today, better representation at this tech conference than we've seen at many of the other ones across Europe. So a big applause to the crowd here today. But I want to know how you tackle the challenge of bringing more women into NASA. It has been an issue in the past. How do you conquer the challenge?
Yeah, so NASA in general, we are very focused on diversity, so we have programs throughout the agency. So I actually live and work in Houston, Texas at the Johnson Space Center, but there are NASA centers all over the United States. We do human spaceflight at Johnson, but we also have many other pieces of NASA, and the entire NASA system is very focused on diversity at the very lowest levels, bringing people in right out of college. And so really then it behooves us sort of in the leadership levels to continue that throughout as you go through your career and get mentored and get promoted on up through. And so that's where we're really focused at the moment. It kind of drops off a little bit past the sort of younger age group, and so part of my responsibility in this job as the chief flight director, I'm the first female who's done this job, and so now I get to be a role model so people can look and see and have a visual aid, both actually for males and females, so it becomes very, very commonplace. So I try to get out and mentor as much as possible, but that sort of mid-level is really, I think, where our challenge is at the moment.
Jonas, this is a topic that you're passionate about, and perhaps you can give a message to the crowd, because you have a lot of jobs here in STEM. What would you say to the executives who are in charge of recruitment about how to ensure there is diversity?
Well, that diversity is really all about executing a business strategy. And in a world that's changing rapidly, you want to have diversity of thought in your decision making. And we know that it's difficult to find talent in lots of different fields, but we have a pool of talent that is underutilized based on its skill level, and that is the representation of women at various levels. So you have to make it part and believe that this is a business strategy. It's an enabler of the execution, and that you will get better business outcomes. We know that it's going to be difficult to find talent, and it's not only because we're in a very tight labor market due to the economic cycle, it's structural. Demographics, if you saw the data around the US yesterday, you saw that the birth rate was the lowest it's been in 30 years. And this is true in Europe as well, and in Japan, and in China. So these are all trends that are structural, so making sure we access and tap into all the available talent is a key business issue. So it needs to be elevated, from a program or one of the initiatives and becoming an integral part of your business strategy.
Is imagery important as well? And here's a tough one for NASA. You had an all-female spacewalk at the International Space Station cancelled earlier this year because NASA had only one of the medium-sized suits to fit the 2 female astronauts. Is that a problem when you're trying to be on message around more diversity?
So certainly imagery is possible, right? But at the same time, it's NASA and we do rocket science. So the technical decisions that are the right thing to do for the safety of the crew on orbit, and in this case, it was important to have the right size in order to do the best spacewalk and be safe. It is, you're putting astronauts outside in a little bitty spaceship, and so we needed to make sure we got it right. So although absolutely imagery is important in diversity and in everything, from our standpoint, we hold the technical truth and our technical decision making, as our highest priority because that's what keeps our crews safe in space. So we've got those 2 sort of priorities that everyone got to see come together a little bit.
Oh, the countdown clock has just flashed negative, and you know what that means in space terms. So we must wrap it up. Holly Ridings from NASA and Jonas Prising from Manpower, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.